right. Here we are. Okay, we're here. Sorry, I was trying to grab a little lunch in between. I teach in the morning, and uh, and now here I am. So there you have it. Okay, so it's good to be here. I got a little Halloween garb going on because I love Halloween. So I've got my skeleton earrings on, if you can see those. Okay, so what are we going to talk about? You're like, stop talking, Jan. Okay, we're going to talk about today the importance of, again, for lack of a better term, early diagnosis when it comes to workplace bullying. Um, Rather than not figuring it out till much, much later. Because one of the things that happens, and I hope you will bear with me as I kind of give you a little bit of the history of my own experience with workplace bullying. So I taught, or excuse me, I was a social worker. I was in practice, and so I was a school social worker, and I was also a single mom, and I think that's important. So I got introduced to toxicity, and there was some bullying happening there if I had to go back and, assess it. When I took the job from professional practice, to academics. So when I went from being a school social worker and I took the job as a professor of social work, that's when my eyes got wide open and figured out there was something wrong in academics. Because the guy that I worked with was just mean, right? And he did a lot of things behind my back and to my face that were what I would consider bullying. But I didn't know what it was. And as a result of that, I did a lot of things that weren't necessarily beneficial for me. One of the best things that happened, was I had a mentor in my first job, as my first teaching job, and she told me to document because there had already been a history with this guy bullying people at work. And she just said to me, and I think I've told you this before, Jan, you need to document. That's all I'm saying. And so that's what I did. But other than that, like one time there was a class scheduled that I was slotted in, and I didn't even know I was slotted for that class. And it was a night class, and I didn't have a babysitter for my kid, and I missed the first class, and I didn't have a syllabus because I didn't know I was slotted for the class. And that's, kind of typical bullying. And so the first few years, I was just living off, winging it. And, because I didn't know what was happening. I think the first thing that you do is you look to yourself to figure out what's wrong with you, that these things are happening to you at work, which is a mistake because the people who are bullied are not the problem. It's the person doing the bullying that's the problem. So it wasn't until about 7 years, then I moved from that job and I went into another job that was probably the worst job I was ever, ever, ever in, And if you've heard me talk, you've heard me talk about that place, And it was at that place I'd gone to a training or talked to some people about what was going on, and the terminology of workplace bullying came up, But I didn't know what it was. And also, I didn't respond in a way that protected me. I responded in a way that increased my vulnerability to bullying, and it ended up hurting I ended up hurting myself because I didn't know how to respond. And frankly, if you want my honest opinion out there, which of course you know you're getting, is that there isn't really anything else out there that helps people deal with bullying, deal with the bully. Most of the advice you get is report or document. Document and report, report and document. And that's great, okay? But most cases of people who are being bullied will never see the light of day in a court because it's legal in most states. In every state in the United States, except for in Puerto Rico, there's some legislation. And sometimes workplace bullying crosses over into illegal discrimination like ageism and racism and sexism, but not always. For example, not in my case, okay? Because everybody who was bullying me basically looked like me, was basically in the same age range as I was. And so there was no illegal discrimination, but they still treated me like shit every day. And so what I was doing, I was paddling a boat without a paddle, right? I was trying to use my hands to paddle a boat going upstream when there were a lot of things coming at me. And so, and the other thing I think is important too is that you have to have a plan and know how to respond. All right, I hope we're back. All right, well, it looks like we have lost our Facebook Live, so I don't know if it'll... All right, well, I might just have to upload it. That's fine. Okay, so anyway, so I was paddling up. I didn't have any safety nets or way to move me forward, because when you have the advice, which is document and report, what you're doing then as a result of that is you're putting all your eggs in one basket, and you're hoping that HR or somebody will step in and intervene, because the only thing you want really is when you're being bullied is you want somebody to stop it. Okay? Which 100% get. I spent 20 some years in workplace bullying, and I tried to get someone to stop it, and nobody ever did. My first job, they did something. Okay? But other than that, nobody did a thing. They let the bullying continue, and frankly, what they did was actually encourage the bully and support the bully, and they thought that I was the problem. Okay? So that in and of itself is hugely problematic, right? So the very person who was making allegations of bullying was me, and because I didn't have any plan and I was winging it, and there was nobody to give me advice about what I should do, I just kept winging it, which was horrible. So if you think about it like this, is I'm diabetic, okay? And when I was 13 years old, I was diagnosed as a diabetic, okay? And as soon as I got that diagnosis, I did everything different. I changed how I ate. I had to take insulin. I had to, do all of these things because I had a health diagnosis that required intervention, and early intervention and keeping your blood sugar normal is good for good health longevity, okay? And if I hadn't done that, I probably at my age would have a lot of health issues that I wouldn't be happy about, okay? And so when we don't, again, for lack of a better term, diagnose the fact that you're in a workplace bullying situation, you can't deal with the problem early on, okay? Because the earlier you diagnose that you're working in workplace bullying, the earlier you can figure out what to do. So for myself, the only thing I ever did was document and report. I didn't do anything until later. Um, you know, I didn't change how I responded to the bully. I didn't change, I kept engaging with them. I kept, saying this is bullying and somebody needs to do something. I was like, again, a hamster on a wheel doing the same things over and over and over. And when you go and you do research, very few people have any help for you if you're in bullying other than document and report. Okay. And so if you know you're in a bully culture early on, if I had known that at the first job and somebody said, and Jan, you're in a bully culture, which means yes, you can document and report, but because the group dynamics and the system is flawed, documenting and reporting will not stop it. You have to do some other things. You right? For example, not engaging with the bullies as much as I did. Maybe don't use the term bullying, right? Identify the problem behavior and maybe don't use the term bullying so much. Maybe change how you react in meetings. Maybe let some things go and now don't make a big issue out of everything. Okay. Not that I did anything. Okay. I want to be clear about this. I didn't do one damn thing to deserve to be bullied, but I didn't always make the situation. Sometimes I made the situation worse. I didn't necessarily, do anything to be bullied, but my actions often allowed the bullies and the bystanders to pile on what they were doing to me, if that makes sense. Okay. And so how I responded, I could have protected myself better if I knew earlier that I was in a bully culture. The other thing I think is so important is that if you know early on that you're being bullied, right? If I, again, knew in that first job I was being bullied, I might not have stayed in academics. I probably would not have gotten a PhD. I probably would have ended up in another social work practice job, which may not have been so engrossed in bullying like academics was, right? So knowing that it's happening is key, right? Having the confirmed, yes, I'm being bullied is really super important. Now, here's one of the things in the problems is that getting your diagnosis of workplace bullying is very subjective, and it often comes from you. So unlike myself, that I could go into a doctor and have a blood test and they could say, yes, you're diabetic, getting your diagnosis of am I in a bully culture generally comes from you. But there is a lot of, pain points, for lack of a better term, that you can identify, and you can make a pretty good decision about whether or not you feel like you're being bullied. Okay, so for example, you have to know the definition of what is bullying, right? And it's not interpersonal conflict, right? There, in my professional opinion, it has to happen for a while. Most often it happens every day, or at least every week, right? The group dynamic is flawed, meaning that, you've tried to alleviate it or get somebody to do something or to stop it, and that actually has made it worse, right? Of course, you have to have the bullying, right? Yelling, verbal, screaming, verbal, email, cyber, on those things. And those things are meant to harm you. They're not meant to support you, right? It's meant to hurt. So I have criteria set up that you can figure out and make a pretty good decision about whether or not you think you're being bullied. Okay. That's important. So then you can take a course of action, meaning you can plan out how you want to respond. And you don't have to leave. Okay. That's one of the things I find so interesting is that we're telling people to do this: document, report, and leave, right? Document, report, and leave. Those are your choices for most experts when it comes to workplace bullying. Well, those aren't all your choices. First off, some people don't want to document. Why? Oh, I don't know, because it takes a hell of a lot of time. Okay, you're already working in a bully culture. Maybe you have a personal life or family and kids, and then on top of that, you want me to write down the pain that's and the abuse that somebody's doing to me? Come on, that's hard. Okay, and report. Yeah, okay, yeah, you should maybe try to report, although I don't think it has to happen every time. It's based on what your end goal is. And the other thing is reporting. If I say to you, document and report, that's not advice. Because I'm not telling you who to report to, how to do it, what kind of evidence or field notes do you need. I'm just telling you, and Godspeed, go ahead and report. There's a lot more to reporting than just going in and making a complaint. Okay, how you do it, what do you say, when do you go in, what evidence do you need? There's all these really important things that you need to know before you walk in the door to report. Or if you don't, what's going to happen is you're going to do the exact same thing that I did that was 100% ineffective. Because what we have a tendency to do, unless you have a plan, is we say, Bob bullied me yesterday. I got this email from Bob. He was belittling me. He called me names. And you say, it's just about the last incident. Well, friends, that's not bullying. Bullying is a series of unfortunate events. A series of unfortunate events. I'm having a hard time getting that out. Meaning that if Bob just sends you an email that's belittling you, that's not bullying. It's that email yesterday was the 150th time Bob has sent you an email. Okay? So there's documenting and reporting is much more complicated. And when you go in and you don't have a plan to report, you get your teeth kicked in because HR says, I don't care, get out. They don't do anything because 99.9% of the time, Bob's already been in there rubbing noses with them, telling HR, you're the problem. So you have to expect some of those things. And there's more to dealing with a bully than just documenting and reporting. Because sometimes how you respond or react, most of the time we're reacting, we're not responding, because reacting is emotional, responding is intentional with purpose. And when you react to Bob yelling at you, you don't respond necessarily in a way that's going to shut Bob down. So you have all of these things that are happening. You're in an environment where you feel powerless. The advice you're getting confirms and reinforces that you're powerless, and then you say to yourself, I just don't know what else I'm going to do. I'm powerless, right? So when you have an early diagnosis, or you understand, even if you don't have an early diagnosis, if you know you're working in bully culture, you're not powerless, you're powerful. You have a lot of things that you can do. You can respond to Bob and shut Bob down verbally, okay? You don't have to let Bob chew you out and call you names. There are ways to professionally respond to Bob, right? One of the strategies I would try, just off the cuff here, is if Bob yells at you in the hallway, I would let Bob yell at me, and I would just stand there looking at Bob. Right directly in his eye with confident eye contact, right? And let him go off, right? You can go into your own head and count to 100, right? Or you can say in your head, Bob's an ass. Bob's an ass, right? As he's yelling at you, you can say those things in your own head, right? And that's a way to deal with Bob in a way that he's going to get sick of yelling at himself because Bob wants you to respond and react. Excuse me, Bob wants you to react. But you can react. You don't have to react. You can respond. Another way, like I was a continual, always engaging. If the bullies emailed me, I wasn't going to let it ever go by because I got so irritated and frustrated with the stuff that they were sending me, right? And so I would respond to every email. I didn't need to respond to any email that had nothing to do with my job, right? And so if I had just stopped responding to every email, I could have reduced the amount of bullying that was happening. Because when my bully would send an email, okay, it was never just me and that person. They always included everybody else. And then that would trigger me. And then I would include more people. And then those people would come at me. And I think you can see how the snowball went down the hill. And the more I engaged, the worse it got for me. So we can learn strategies to shut Bob down. And here's the thing about the strategies. They're not that hard to learn, and they actually make you a better professional, right? If you learn how to confront and shut down gaslighting, that is an art form as a communication technique that we know 99.9% of the people in our world don't know. Just watch politics. There's gaslighting happening all over the time, and people don't know how to shut it down, right? Well, gaslighting is a common technique with bullies that can be shut down easily. And so you're not trying to develop a plan because you think you can stop the bullying, okay? If it's baked into your foundation of your organization, you're not going to stop it, okay? But, which is a sad thing and wrong, but if you learn communication techniques, if you learn grounding techniques, if you learn ways to de-escalate and disengage, those strategies make you a better professional. And when you utilize those against Bob, your bullying, you can change how the bullying shows up, right? So if I had disengaged and not continued to engage in every email I got, I would have reduced how much I was bullied, right? So if Bob is yelling at you in a meeting and you're defending yourself, and then pretty soon Betty jumps on board, you can sit in silence, or you can use neutral scripts to respond to Bob and Betty, but not give them any fuel to bully you, if that makes sense, right? So we need to do two things when it comes to bullying, maybe three, we'll see. The first thing is you need to know that it's happening, period. Okay, that's for your own peace of mind. You don't need to come home anymore and figure out, well, what's going on? Am I being bullied or not? Right? You don't need that confusion. You need that question answered. Yes or no. Okay? And then secondly, then you need a strategy and a plan. What am I going to do? Okay? You don't have to make any snap decisions and say, oh, well, I'm bullied. I got to get out of here. No, because if you're like me and your job is high risk for bullying, you could go from one bully culture to the next. Okay? You don't want that. Right? It's better to know the evil person you're dealing with than to take a risk and go from one shit show into another that happens to be worse. Okay? So you can figure out whether you're bullied or not, get that answered, and then you can also have strategies and learn strategies to deal with what's happening. Okay? And the benefit of that is twofold. One, there is nothing There is nothing more satisfying than knowing that you have shut down your bully and they don't even know it, right? There's a lot of power, for lack of a better term, and empowerment in that, knowing that you got one over on them. And the other thing too is when you realize that you are responding with intention instead of reacting just to be reacting, you realize that when it comes to work, who you are and what you do matters, even if you are in a massive bully culture, right? You then realize that you have some power, and that is important to rebuild some of the damage that Bob has done to you. So I am pretty excited about this, and I've created a class, and I'm almost done. It's Am I Being Bullied at Work? And it's an online class, right? There's, 3 lessons, so it's nothing outrageous. And you can figure out whether or not you're being bullied, right? So that you understand that bullying is not just between me and the bully, that there's these complicated group dynamics, that there's complicated organizational culture where it becomes embedded into the organization. And when you're trying to go to HR, you can understand why HR doesn't respond in the way that they should respond, right? So it helps you understand the intricate complexities of workplace bullying in a way that helps you understand that it isn't about you, right? It's about what's happening in your workplace. And then you learn about the bully's playbook, their tactics. And of course, the most important is after you answer that question, am I being bullied? You learn strategies that you can learn today and start using tomorrow. Because to shut down a bully and to protect yourself, okay, I call these workplace self-defense moves, right? Because you're protecting yourself at the same time you're trying to shut down the bullying as best you can, okay? And so that will be coming out on Friday. I'm just finishing up and working out some of the details. But the reason that is so important is you will get that confirmation, right? I have criteria, and you can go through the assessment and say, okay, yes, I've got that. Yes, this is happening. And you'll know for sure that you're being bullied. So you don't have to wonder anymore. And once you know that, you can fight back in a way that goes well beyond document and report. You can have actual things that you can use and are effective to shut down bullies, but also make you a better professional. So that will be coming out. My goal is to get that out on Friday, and I'll definitely put a link down below for that. Again, if you have any questions or if there's anything you'd really love me to talk about, just drop me a comment, or you can always email me at jan@stopbullyculture.com and look for the course coming out. And if there's anything I can do, as always, let me know. Thank you so much.